like everything's happening so fast. So, I went into the procedure room and they said to me, you're going for an ultrasound. Now for me, an ultrasound was, they take goopy stuff and put it on the thing and then go around your stomach, right? So I'm good with that. So when I got in there and she came out with this thing and I'm like, oh my God, I've never seen that before. She had an accent and she said to me, oh, you don't want this? I said, no. She said, so you don't want me to torture you? No. So she said, I'm going to put down you refuse. I said, go ahead. So I didn't realize how serious it was at the time because I had no idea what was happening. So when we got to the gynecological oncologist, he said to me, you refuse this test. I said, well, yeah, they want it. So he says, honey, you have to have this. He goes, it's the only way we're going to be able to have an accurate read. So he looked at my husband, and my husband, he's up here in the front, he's about 6'6". He said, I'll make sure she gets it. So I said, you're going to come in there with me. So he did. He came in, and I have to say to you, the woman who came in when I had that test done in the outpatient, again, it's about chemistry with the person that is coming in to explain these things to you, and she was very different than the woman in the hospital. And I felt more comfortable, and honestly, it was fine. I didn't have any issue when we got through this thing, but that is what they used for better diagnostics. So yeah, it was necessary. So I did go through with it. The colostomy bag. Well, I mean, look, I told them that I didn't want to wake up with a colostomy bag, and I would venture to say that there's no one in this room that would want to wake up with a bag, okay? I work in the medical field, and I just, in my mind, that would be, gosh, awful. I mean, I'm sure that if I really had to deal with it, just like all of this, I would deal with it, but it didn't come to that, so thankfully. But my wishes were not to have that, and he did respect that. He said, okay. And my husband wasn't happy with that because obviously, the thought was you just want to live at that point. But there were certain things I wasn't willing to live with. Just like radiation, luckily, I didn't have to have it. But maybe I would have thought about it differently if she said, you need radiation. I was fortunate, and I feel very fortunate because a lot of the things that I went through, like if they said to you, they said to me, we recommend a port. Well, of course I hated the port, but when they said that the alternative to constantly having chemo put through your arms would be far worse, I said okay, and I trusted them and I did it. So I think really with any procedure or anything that they recommend, it's how the person explaining the procedure does it and knows how to work with your particular personality. I mean, granted, you have very small snapshot of opportunity to get to know your patient or the person in front of you, but if you can get them just a little bit, you might be able to convince them to go forward with something that might seem very awful.
It's actually a question for the husbands, because I think in general, in society, women tend to have more of a caretaker role, either for their husband, for their parents, for their kids. So what was it like for you guys being there for your wives throughout this experience?
For me, I just kind of jumped into it. And honestly, when we were together, we had only been together 8 months before I proposed to her the second surgery. And really that was just because I was having so many problems with the doctors, the nurses, the insurance companies, and we got married because we had to. But as a caregiver, it's been a challenge because dealing with you guys is not easy. When you're a doctor, and this is my view of it, I've dealt with a lot of arrogant doctors. I've dealt with doctors that I've literally put up against the wall and had them listen to my wife because they will think that everything that they're saying is the word of God and then that's it. And it doesn't work that way. I'm a very protective person, so I think that was very easy for me to jump into that caregiver role. But every step of the way, it's been a journey with the medical industry, the insurance company, the doctors, the nurses, you name it. I've had to fight everybody, and I don't like it because you look at me and you're going to say, okay, that guy's going to kill me, and doctors will call security, and I need to be there for my wife. But it wasn't easy at first, but you just deal with it. On an emotional level, I've had to deal with my own things because for many years I just had to deal with it and swallow it, But what people don't realize is that you yourself are going to have to go through, talking to somebody. She has PTSD. I have versions of PTSD every time I listen to her telling me what it is. And she's like, you need to go talk to somebody. Well, it's hard for me to go talk to somebody about it. So my idea of dealing with it is being out here with her, talking to husbands, talking to doctors, talking to whomever wants to listen to me, because no one takes our perspective into consideration. I read a lot. Chances are I could have a conversation with each and every one of you about the medical industry or about your protocols, and you would listen. You would think that I was some kind of medical specialist in some regard. But when I talk to doctors on the front line, you're just looking at me like I'm some idiot who just read something out of a book, and now I'm arguing with you over something that he should know because he has a degree on it. It's not the case. Listen, I've given her alternatives. I will not tell you, and I will not sit down and say to you that they worked, because I am not a medical professional. But there has to be more. As much as I respect the medical industry, I think there's more out there, and it's not being looked into. That's my advocacy, what I advocate for. That's what I argue for. Because she's here 17 years later after being told 6 to 8 months, she'd be given 6 to 8 months. She quit chemo after 3 tries. And every time she did the chemo, it was like it was killing her. It wasn't doing anything but hurting her. It isn't easy. I haven't met a caregiver who will tell you that it's been easy to deal with. I've met women whose husband leave right away after being in a relationship for 20, 30 years because they can't deal with it. I'm part of groups nationwide that we talk, and we understand each other because there's nobody out there who listens to what we have to say. So we kind of help each other understand or be able to speak to doctors and our wives and all those things. And as far as the sexual aspect, the intimate aspect of it, no one talks about it. There's an issue there for us because every time we go to conferences or events, it's the one thing that never gets spoken of, and women have a hard time. So we, the ones that do speak about it as men, we tried to help others because there's our relationship gets strained. Imagine you're together with the person for 30 years, and all of a sudden, this happens, and you break up, or they leave, and the reason was something that you could have talked about or helped with. It's not easy. I don't.
I agree with a lot of things that you say. I work in the medical field also, and I work with a lot of doctors. And it is true about some of the doctors being very arrogant. Helene and I, we walked out of doctors' offices. There was one oncologist, 2 oncologists that we really didn't like. And when we got done speaking to these doctors, we walked out and I said, this is not for you. And we both agreed we had to find somebody that we trusted, that took his time to speak to her and to me in a way that explained things a little more clearly and also compassion. And there's things that also the doctors don't explain to you until you're going through it. Like with chemo, the first chemo treatment, we had no idea what we were in for. And we got there and she got pretty sick from the first treatment. And then, we got home, she was pretty sick. And as the chemo treatments went on, we kind of knew how to prepare for it to go in. It was basically like going on a camping trip for the day. I would pack food and sandwiches and fruit and drinks and sodas and stuff. And we would sit there, and I would tell her it was kind of like a race for her. like kind of think of it in that way to her because that's what she likes to do. But it's hard to say. Emotionally, it's very hard for the caregivers because I'm watching my wife who ran 50 miles. She couldn't walk 10 feet to the bathroom. I had to put her in a wheelchair and I had to help her in the bathroom. You can't imagine what that's like to somebody that you love so much. It's very difficult. And watching her go through emotional swings and things like that, she's a very accomplished professional. And she was in chemo treatment, she was doing conference calls and working through chemo. But when she got done with chemo and got done through all this, like she said before, the stuff after treatment and after everything is done, still going back to the doctors, that was probably some of the hardest stuff that we went through. And then also prior to surgery, the pain that she was in was extreme, and I didn't know what to do for it. I mean, I tried everything. I mean, we were going to the doctors, we were in the ER. I mean, it's things that were just really, some things that it almost PTSD to me, because there's times when she speaks, and she's spoken at other things before I've been to, where I start bawling. I mean, I'm crying because I was there with her, and it was just watching her go through this was really difficult.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's somebody that you love, and you want to do everything you can to help protect them. And when you can't do that, that's the part as a husband or as a caregiver, whether you're wife or husband, it's very, very hard.
Yeah,
really
there was Tina's first chemo. She had an allergic reaction so badly. She was given. She had an allergic reaction that shut down her lungs. She coded, or they couldn't get a heartbeat. And watching her gasp for air and then not move or function at all, and the nurse is going nuts trying to figure out what the problem was, that she had to call. She had a code blue or whatever you guys call it, and the doctors are rushing in to get the help. Watching your wife being, shocked back to life and not coming through, it's pretty traumatic. For years, I had that. I would wake up in a cold sweat just seeing that over and over and over and over again. So it's things that we go through that others don't seem to understand. And then when we talk to the doctors, and they're like, well, she's the patient, and you have to remember there's more to all of this. It's not just the wives. It's a lot of emotional baggage that comes along with this. So
she had a seizure in my arms in the house. She felt it coming on, and basically in my arms, I had her and I was able to put her in bed, and I had the paramedics at the house right away. She was dehydrated from the chemo. This was right after a chemo treatment. She was so dehydrated. They rushed her back to the hospital. They gave her IV, and she came around. She was pretty good after that. She had a vasovagal seizure when they were putting in the port or the IVC filter. The nurse that was doing it, I'm watching them brutalize her arm, trying to give her IV because she was dehydrated, and then she had a seizure. Right, I'm holding her, and the lady's telling me, "Get out of the way." I go, "What do you want me to drop her on the floor? Is that what you want?" I'm standing there. I was the one holding her. They had no idea what they were doing. I mean, and the thing is that there's a lot of things that we went through that are very emotional, and things that I never thought I would go through in my life with my spouse.
I have a question for you. Do you think this type of events, super for helping us, helping other survivors, does it help you to communicate better with the family, with the husband? Because I see a lot of, we haven't seen this facets of, we see the patient maybe not too many husbands come in. Do you think you guys have a different level of communication because of these events? Or you have the same discussions at home?
With our spouses?
Repeat the question in the mic.
So the question that I have is that, you see a lot of, dynamic interaction here. The question I have when you go to this type of events, do you find out more things that you haven't talked home about it? I mean, what they're sharing right now, or what you think your husband thought about this, and then he sharing something different.
Are you asking because the today, do we have better?
Overall, yes. Overall,
Absolutely. I think that the this whole experience has deepened our relationship. I mean, it's hard. It's a hard experience to go through, but I can't say this without crying. I mean, I couldn't have done it without my husband.
Like my husband said, we were dating for 8 months when I got diagnosed. So it was very difficult to go from being, newly dating and all the googly and all that stuff to him, like Craig said, taking me to the bathroom. That's not sexy at all for 8 months, man. Having your boyfriend wipe your ass because you can't, because you have needles all over the place. That's not sexy. And then, again, you go through everything. Like Helene said, you're done. Move on with your life. How are you supposed to move on with your life? How are we not going to change with everything that we go through? Yes, we got married because we needed to get married. I wouldn't change that. I love my husband very, very much. But the bond that we have is stronger now than it was before. I told him to get the F out of the house many times because it was hard. Emotionally, it was hard.
First 5 years were
The
toxic.
first 5 years of afterwards, because we just couldn't deal. And when you went from dating to marriage, and in between there, you had cancer. To me, I believe there's a missing piece that the market or any of you maybe could get into, where after the whole thing that you help us with emotions and sexuality and everything like that. That is not being touched on. So yeah, it's hard.
My husband and I were married a year when I first started to have symptoms. So this is my second marriage. And so I say, in the first year of your marriage, you're supposed to be having a good time. You're supposed to be building a life together. And instead, we ended up in tons of doctor's offices. I mean, I feel like Greg is my soulmate. And like Mary said, you can't get through this without them. The exchanges, that we've had as I've become a speaker in the last couple of years, it only makes it more apparent to me how important it is to realize that although you might be the patient, that the person that's alongside of you is suffering too, and you have to acknowledge that. And I think my mom tried very hard to get him to go out of the house and go to the gym and do the things that he enjoys, because you can't really be a fabulous caregiver unless you take care of yourself. And I know that that there's statistics out there that often long-time caregiving is a significant impact on the caregiver's health. So I think these exchanges just make me realize even more, and I realize how grateful I am, because there's often been times in our relationship where I've said to him, why didn't you just leave? I mean, how do you deal with all this? Like, this is just awful. This is not what you're supposed to be dealing with in the first couple of years of a marriage. This is just like horrible. And you see, you're trying to kick me out and not going anywhere. So, I mean, yeah, it's like Tina said, you have your spouse helping you in the bathroom, carrying you, making sure that you eat. I mean, I've been a very strong-willed person over the years, and I like being independent, and I like being tough and rugged out there. That's why I do the things I do, and this to me was very weak, and I didn't like seeing myself weak and actually kind of pathetic. And so I had to allow myself to be taken care of, and that's often very difficult.
add, a few things. Obviously, you hear the stories, their stories just try to correlate now with your scientific information or data that you have. So for us, we don't have a very good screening test. We don't. And now you know what it means, when you see the patient in front of you. I think we don't have a very early diagnosis test, for us to do. And we're working on different trials and try to do everything and look at those numbers, that percentage versus the other, one group versus the other. We don't have. But I think what we can do is for us to know what's available, and we should know well. And I think you as a medical students, whatever you might do in the future, I think that's important. You don't want to be in a situation that you cannot offer the patient the best that you know. And I think the other way that you guys have to understand, we have to learn and to get better each day to communicate that information to the patient in a way that I understand and keep what they call it compliant. It's not compliance, a lot of things it's understanding. And sometimes they're complex. When you think about ovarian cancer, we're gonna do a hysterectomy and they remove the ovaries and we're gonna heal in a certain amount of time. But you know what? You have multiple procedure and testing. Have a social context, financial context, insurance context behind it. So you have to be able to know to communicate with the patient. If you talk to them a little bit early about things, it's a little bit easier. You develop a trust. It's just a small step that you learn early communication. Is that, even if you present with everything, listen, we have 15 minutes, 30 minutes, we have our situation that's very hard to do. But you try to develop a trust with the patient, and then you're going to increase the compliance with the outcome. So, anybody, any more questions? Just have to have another run at it, just the last few words, the last words of wisdom.
I could offer, if you are giving information, which you will be doing, whatever you're going to, just remind you, it was really almost impossible to process any of the information that we were given immediately because your mind just shuts down. And even though my husband was with me, it's so emotional that it's very difficult to hold on to any of that information. So I would recommend that any information is repeated, because I didn't always hear it the first time, like the chronic disease thing. I kind of denied that for a long time. And also, if things could be written for support groups, alternative medicine, information, cancer services, and legitimate websites. Because even though everybody tells you, don't go on the internet, you're not going to get good information. When you wake up or you can't sleep at 2 o'clock in the morning and you have a pain, or you consult Dr. Google, because that's who's here. And if we had a direction to legitimate websites like the American Cancer Society, or there's a lot of ovarian cancer sites that, I think that would be helpful for people.
Every patient is different. Every person is different. The person that you saw last is not the same person you're seeing again. Every situation is different. And you have to treat them as individuals. That's very important. I think Mary said everything that I pretty much wanted to say.
That not every patient that you see will fit into a perfect little box. They have to look at what their life is like before, what they're saying to you, and figure out a way that you can connect with them so that you might just be missing this one piece of information that actually leads you to being able to give them an earlier diagnosis.
I learned a lot. I like to have had something when I was a medical student like this. It's just, I was part of a generation that probably took care of you. But I think we're evolving, and I think, our students are here and they're, you know, we try to teach them humanistic qualities, and they're by themselves, and I don't have to teach them, they have to teach a different generation of what
Right, and I think the whole society of, cancer, is the pink movement. And us teal ladies really don't like the pink movement, because the pink movement is all gynecological, and that's not true, you know? So you see TV, you see internet, you see all that stuff, just be aware that it's not all pink. It's teal also. And I see some of you have teal on and stuff, and that's awesome. And throughout the years that I've been going through this, there's a lot of progression, and I'm very grateful for it. There's more research, and a lot of things are going on, and that makes me very happy.
And we appreciate MLCC for helping us have this. I think, you know, you guys doing a great job, and thank you everyone.